She entered the courtroom calm and confident, her body language relaxed, her face steady. This was not how someone looks when they believe their life is about to change. Nicole Callaham expected sympathy, not scrutiny. Her past as a teacher, her clean record, and her pregnancy all felt like protection she could lean on.
Smiling in court. That is a former South Carolina kindergarten teacher and theater director who's accused of grooming and sexually abusing a boy for years, starting when he was just 14 years old.
For a moment, it worked. The room stayed quiet as her lawyers spoke. Heads nodded, pens paused. Then the prosecutor began reading the evidence. Dates lined up, messages stacked into the thousands. Patterns became impossible to ignore. That was the moment the air shifted. The smiles faded. The story she believed in no longer mattered. Facts had taken control, and there was no stepping away from them. In a quiet South Carolina town, a story began long before anyone spoke out loud. It did not start with police lights or courtrooms, but with memories that would not stay silent. In May of 2025, an 18-year-old young man walked into a police office carrying years of confusion and pain. He said the harm began when he was only 14 years old. He did not rush his words or look for attention. He came after years of thinking, waiting, and trying to understand what had happened to him. The person he spoke about was not a stranger. She was someone his family trusted. Her name was Nicole Callaham.
Looking back, it sickens me knowing Nikki manipulated our son and our family. She was waiting on this opportunity, and she found the perfect victim and family to prey on.
Now, the Anderson County Sheriff's Office says Callaham continued the relationship with the victim for 2 years, claiming she signed the student out of school, took him to practices, and supervised him during after-school activities. The deputies say this led to a prolonged pattern of abuse, and the alleged victim is now 18 years old.
At that moment, no arrest had happened, and no charges were filed. Investigators only had a voice, a timeline, and a story that pointed backward into childhood. Officers listened closely because the details were clear and steady. The young man explained that the connection lasted for years and shaped his life in ways he was still learning to name. This was only the start, and no one yet knew how deep the story would go. To the outside world, Nicole Callaham looked like the safest person in the room. She was a kindergarten teacher who worked with small children every day. Parents saw her as patient, warm, and careful with young minds. She had worked at Homeland Park Primary School since 2017 and built a strong image in the community. She also spent her evenings leading musical theater for children and teens. Families praised her for giving time and care after school hours. She held college degrees, earned honors, and stayed active in church life. She was married and raising a young child of her own. People believed she understood children because she lived among them. When parents spoke her name, it came with trust and comfort. No warning signs stood out in public spaces. Her life looked full of purpose and service. That image would later matter more than anyone realized.
Now, we did reach out to the Anderson 5 School District. They tell us Callaham was a teacher at Homeland Park Primary School from 2017 until she resigned in May of this year. Callaham's defense saying she should be let out of jail because of good behavior.
The first meeting did not feel important at the time. In 2021, a 14-year-old boy named Grant walked into a theater space for a musical audition. His family hoped the stage would help him grow and gain confidence. Nicole Callaham was there as a director and guide. She spoke kindly and gave attention that felt helpful. She offered tips, support, and encouragement that made the teen feel seen. Nothing about the moment felt wrong to his parents. They believed he had met a teacher who cared about helping kids succeed. Rehearsals followed, and the contact continued in normal-looking ways. The stage became a place of learning and focus. Trust grew quietly in the background. No one thought this meeting would change the shape of a childhood. What investigators later called grooming did not look obvious at first. It came as small choices that seemed helpful on the surface. Nicole offered rides to practice when schedules were busy. She stayed close during rehearsals and gave extra guidance. She signed the teen out of school for theater needs, even though he was not her student. Each action alone looked harmless. Together, they created private time and growing control. The teen began to rely on her direction and approval. His parents trusted her role and did not question the access. The line between teacher and child slowly blurred. According to investigators, this slow pattern mattered most. It built comfort, silence, and dependence without alarms. By the time concern could have surfaced, the pattern was already set. As time passed, the connection became harder to separate from daily life. Records later showed repeated school signouts and overlapping theater schedules. These details created a clear trail of access. Investigators said Nicole provided alcohol, marijuana, and nicotine to the teen. These acts were not accidents. They were choices that shifted power and made a child feel older than he was. Meetings happened away from safe spaces, including hotels and parking areas in another city. The teen's world began to shrink around her presence. Even when parents tried to limit contact, the control adapted. Digital contact replaced physical distance. An Xbox purchase later showed effort to keep communication alive. Each step tightened the bond and reduced outside voices. The evidence told a story of planning, not chance. Nicole's public life made the situation harder to see. She worked daily with young children and was praised for her results. Her students performed well in school, and families spoke highly of her dedication. She stayed active in community programs and church events. Many people knew her name and trusted her role. This visibility worked as a shield. It made questions feel uncomfortable and doubt feel unfair. While her image grew stronger, the private behavior stayed hidden. Investigators later said this balance allowed the harm to continue. A person who looked safe was given space to act without challenge. The contrast between public praise and private actions became one of the most troubling parts of the case. For the teen at the center of the story, life slowly changed. He left sports and focused more on theater, where attention felt intense and personal. While his stage work improved, other parts of his life suffered. School performance dropped and stress increased. Family members noticed changes, but did not know the cause. The weight of secrecy grew heavier each year. By the time he reached adulthood, the memories had not faded. They waited quietly until he was ready to speak. When he finally did, he said the experience shaped how he saw trust, authority, and safety. His decision to come forward marked a break in silence, but the story itself was far from over. Investigators later said this slow damage is why children often struggle to explain harm while it is happening. The teen believed adults knew best and followed guidance without question. Silence became part of normal life. Nothing in his world offered language for what he felt. That confusion stayed with him long after the events ended. The first concerns did not come from the teen himself. They appeared as small changes noticed by family. Grades slipped and focus drifted. Mood shifts were brushed aside as growing pains. When parents reached out to Nicole with limits, she responded with insistence. She framed her involvement as necessary for success. Her words carried authority and experience. Parents wanted to believe her. That belief kept the door open longer than it should have been. When physical contact was reduced for a time, the connection did not end. Communication moved into screens and devices. Messages replaced meetings, but influence stayed strong. Investigators later explained that control does not need physical presence to survive. It only needs access. The teen remained emotionally tied and unsure how to step away. Each year added more weight to the silence. Behind closed doors, the teen tried to understand his role in what happened. He questioned whether he had caused the attention or misunderstood the care. These thoughts are common, investigators said, because grooming often shifts blame inward. Nicole's standing in the community did not change during this time. She continued working with children and families who trusted her deeply. Her reputation acted like a wall between truth and discovery. People often believe danger looks loud and obvious. This case showed how quiet it can be. Harm moved through normal days without drawing notice. As the teen approached adulthood, distance finally created space to think. With time came clarity, and with clarity came questions that would not leave. When he finally spoke to authorities, he did so with care and detail. He knew the story mattered beyond himself. The silence finally broke after Grant turned 18. He walked into law enforcement with a clear story and a steady voice. He explained what began years earlier and why he could not stay quiet anymore. Investigators listened closely because the timeline made sense and the details stayed consistent.
Just because I'm a man doesn't mean that it should be shunned away. Because I was a child, I wasn't a man, I was a boy.
While the report was being reviewed, life around Nicole Callaham shifted quietly. On May 21st, 2025, she resigned from her teaching job without public explanation. Parents noticed, but were not alarmed. Schools change staff often, and nothing seemed urgent. Weeks passed with no noise. Then, on July 10th, 2025, she turned herself in. She walked into custody on her own. Charges were read slowly. 3 counts of criminal sexual conduct with a minor. 1 count of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. For many watching, it felt unreal. The trusted image cracked, but the full picture was still hidden. When police seized Nicole's phones, they did not expect the volume they would find. One device was used for school contacts. The other was for theater work. Together, they held more than 12,000 messages. The words were not casual. They showed closeness that crossed clear lines. Pet names appeared often. Inside jokes repeated again and again. Conversations stayed private and personal. Investigators said the tone mattered as much as the content. The messages did not belong between an adult and a child. At the bond hearing on July 11th, 2025, prosecutors laid out the timeline in front of the judge. They explained how the contact grew and how long it lasted. A letter from Grant's mother was read aloud in court. Her words described trust that was broken and damage that could not be undone. She spoke of confusion, anger, and grief that stayed with her family. Nicole's attorney responded by saying she was pregnant and not a flight risk. The judge listened and then set bond at $40,000. Strict orders followed. Just as the Anderson County case settled into place, the story moved again. Days later, Greenville County filed its own charges. The number shocked many who were following closely. 12 new charges were added. 7 counts involved criminal sexual conduct with a minor under 16. 5 counts involved placing a child at risk. Prosecutors said the behavior followed Grant even after he changed schools. They claimed Nicole removed him from campus without permission and kept control despite distance. The court reviewed the allegations carefully. A new bond was set at $120,000. Combined with the earlier bond, the total reached $160,000. Each county now held part of the case. The story was no longer local. It crossed cities, systems, and trust circles. With each filing, the weight of the evidence grew heavier.
In Greenville, Callaham faces 8 counts of criminal sexual conduct with a minor and 4 counts of unlawfully placing a child at risk for allegedly providing the victim with alcohol. As she entered the courtroom Monday, Callaham smiled at people in attendance, including her family and fiancé.
Ms. Callaham is 8 to 9 weeks pregnant.
Callaham's attorney asked the court to consider her presumed innocence and requested a surety bond be set. He argued she needs prenatal care and is not a danger to the community.
Bond did not mean freedom. It came with strict limits that shaped daily life. Nicole was placed under house arrest and ordered to wear a GPS monitor. A psychological evaluation was required. Any contact with the victim or his family was banned. Every move now left a record. As these conditions became public, attention turned to Grant. He chose to speak openly and identify himself.
The judge granted bond, but with several conditions. She will be placed under house arrest with GPS monitoring, have no contact with the victim, and must undergo both a mental and psychological evaluation to determine if she's competent to stand trial. The judge also established a red zone, prohibiting her from coming within a mile of the victim's residence in Anderson. Callaham's attorney thanked the judge as she turned and smiled at him before she was escorted out by police.
By mid-August, consequences reached another level. On August 13th, 2025, the South Carolina Board of Education suspended Nicole Callaham's teaching license. The decision came while criminal cases were still active. Another investigation by Clemson City Police continued quietly in the background. no final outcomes were announced. Nicole now awaited trial across 2 counties, facing 15 charges with the possibility of more. Prosecutors centered their case on clear evidence. Thousands of messages showed long-term grooming. School sign-out logs proved access and control. Theater records placed time and location. Grant's testimony tied everything together. Each piece stood on its own, but together, they formed a clear pattern. The case forced many to rethink how trust works and how harm can hide behind familiar faces. Grant continued to speak, not as a headline, but as a person. He explained how the experience pushed him to grow up too fast. He said maturity came before he was ready for it. Speaking out, he said, felt like a weight lifting from his chest. Support from family and loved ones made the fight possible. He urged others not to protect someone else's comfort at the cost of their own safety. He said silence often feels easier, but it keeps pain alive. His words reached people who had never seen themselves as victims before. He admitted the process was hard and draining. Still, he said the end would be worth it.
All I really want the public to know is that though it's a traumatic event, I'm here to fight and I'm not going to back down. And that I think more awareness needs to be brought to things like this, and just because I'm a man doesn't mean that it should be shunned away. Because I was a child, I wasn't a man, I was a boy, and yeah, that's pretty much what I want them to know.
The courtroom did not end the story. It exposed it. What once hid behind trust, titles, and quiet routines was now forced into the open. This case showed how harm can grow slowly, without noise, and how long it can take for truth to surface. It reminded everyone that grooming does not look dangerous at first, and that children often stay silent because they do not yet have the words to speak. When the evidence finally spoke, it spoke clearly, and it could not be ignored. If this story made you think, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Subscribe so you won't miss more real stories like this on the channel.